Jack.
Levi.
The Book Club from Hell.
Hello everyone, this is Jack with the Book Club from Hell, a satanic cult of automaton assassins, mind-controlled by extended exposure to Hyperborea schizoedits and Zyn oral nicotine pouches. This episode, we had special guest David from Tooky's Mag and Tooky's Sidebar Book Club podcast on the show. We talked about Program to Kill by David McGowan, first published in 2004, and a seminal text among the conspiratorially minded and followers of parapolitics. In it, McGowan claims that, among other things, serial killers are produced in government programs, that pedophile rings play a role in brutalising children, possibly for the purposes of mind control, and that satanic organisations have their blood-stained fingers in all of this. If you like what we're doing with this podcast and want to support us, we have a Patreon account, the link to which is in the show notes. We release bonus episodes on Patreon, you can hear upcoming episodes early, and we have weekly chats with subscribers about our most recent episodes. I've also published a novel called Tower, the first few chapters of which are available for free on my Substack, the link to which is in the show notes. I need to come up with a more effective strategy for marketing Tower than just shilling it at the start of each episode. Writing books is fun, shilling them is something I'm not so good at, but until I come up with something better, I'll just keep pestering you here. We also have a Discord server for this podcast, on which you can find Levi, me, and plenty of other degenerates who listen to the Book Club from Hell, the link to which is once again in the show notes. And finally, I encourage everyone listening to check out Tooky's Mag on Substack, as well as the excellent Tooky's Sidebar Book Club podcast. Sidebar sees three internet gremlins, David, Gabe, and Capitalissimo, talking about recently published books, more often than not from independent authors, as well as the occasional diversion into significant artistic or political movements, such as parapolitics or Skibbity Toilet. I very highly recommend their podcast and their Substack, the links to which are in the show notes to this episode. So, if you're ready to be exposed to several information hazards at once, then listen on. Enjoy. So for this episode, we're joined by Dave from Tooky's Mag and the associated Sidebar podcast. Dave chose this book, which is Programmed to Kill by David. I keep wanting to say David McGowan because I've been listening to a lot of Theory Underground, but it's definitely not. David McGowan. I'm pretty tired. I'm definitely going to refer to him as David McGowan at least once in this episode, and I just want to reinforce to listeners that David McGowan is not a person who writes books about satanic, pedophile, mind control, assassin, CIA, conspiracy theories. But yeah, David McGowan, it's an intense book. It was 350 pages of the equivalent of a cork board with lots and lots of black and white grainy photographs pasted on it, connected by spools of red yarn, with the occasional courtroom drama. Why did you pick this book, or why did you suggest this book to us, David?
Well, I regret selecting a little bit. It was very interesting. I put forward The Diary of Nicholas Cresswell, which is a fun adventure, high sea sailing kind of travelogue, historical travelogue. And then at some point, me and some of the degenerates in the Book Club from Hell Discord mentioned this book, and we started talking because I just picked it up because I was doing some research into a minor sub-community called parapolitics, parapolitical thinkers, writers, podcasters. And this book is kind of I don't want to say a Bible, it's an oft-referenced tome in those circles. And it's almost like it's like the essential text, right? So if you go to certain circles, it's like, oh, have you read Spengler? Certain circles, it's, oh, have you read Das Kapital? Some circles, it's this is like their initiating text.
For fuck's sake.
Yeah.
I haven't frequented those parapolitical circles. I'm now more aware of them, especially after Tooky's Mag Sidebar podcast did an episode on parapolitics. I've been more interested in them, but I haven't joined those communities or lurked much. I've let you contaminate yourself with them and bring that information to me in podcast format. But now I've read a foundational text of theirs. I recall you saying in your podcast episode on parapolitics that this book is so highly regarded in certain circles that it is its own abbreviation. People refer to what would be a PTK, program to kill, and it's understood without explanation that they are referring to this august tome.
Yeah, it's a foundational text, and it has and parapolitics, I guess in summary, what historically it's just a term that means politics conducted through unofficial channels. I forget the writer's name now. David, I think it was another David actually. Anyway, what it is as a community now over the last 3 years or so has become increasingly popular. It's a, I'd say vaguely left-wing, vaguely people in sort of a Marxist mental framework. I don't mean that in the boomer sense. I mean, many would self-describe as Marxist, that have a conspiratorial lens that they view the world through. And so I just found it interesting because I came across some of the ideas that are in this book years ago on a different from a slightly different political perspective, and some of it actually completely by accident, which maybe I can share as we go through it. Like I actually came across some of these from people who claimed to have some knowledge of it way back, like 8 years ago. But anyway, so I had some interest in some of these ideas, never the serial killer side though. Like for me, some of the concepts around like Epstein, pedophilia as a method of political control, sex as a method of political control, libido dominandi, shout out, friend of the show, E. Michael Jones. Some of those ideas I'm more familiar with, but then serial killers I've always found very uninteresting for some reason. My girlfriend and then wife and other girls I've known, they love serial killers. They love learning about them, following their I always found that media a little tedious.
Yeah.
This kind of flipped my brain on that.
Yeah, I've never been hugely interested in serial killers, but I've listened to death metal for long enough that I just have quite a good working knowledge of particularly US serial killers from listening to enough US death metal bands. It's just seeped into my brain subliminally. So I was more comfortable with that. I knew a lot less about the international pedophile ring conspiracies when it came to this book. That was more of an eye-opener. Regarding a topic which I've more or less intentionally avoided up until the point when I read 350 pages dedicated in large part to joining together in a patchwork many
Mm-hmm.
different pedophile conspiracies. Well, I say conspiracies, like also actual cases.
Yeah, I think maybe that's something to say up front. This is an extremely interesting book, but extremely disorganized, and he has a ton of really solid facts and real clear cases, like you say. And then there's also a lot more I don't know what the word would be, wishy-washy. There's a lot of instances where there might be something in there somewhere I'm like, I just think he's totally off base. But it's an interesting book, and it's one I'm glad I read. Maybe a question to think about as we go through this is would we recommend other people read it? Because I'm pretty torn on that, actually. I think maybe the summary might be the better way to take this book in.
Yeah, in terms of recommendations, I mean, we can go into it in more detail towards the end of the episode, but yeah, this is I guess it's for a very particular type of person. Like basically everything we read for this show. There'll be a group of people, a small minority, who will really get a kick out of it. And probably the majority of people, if you gave it to them, everything from, not even the content of the book, just the front cover, which looks like some bits of flesh stitched together with the names of serial killers superimposed over it. It's a really grainy, kind of shitty looking image as well. It's just everything about the book is unpleasant.
I think it's a torso with a pentagram carved into it, isn't it? If you look closely, it's a pentagram, I think, on his torso.
Okay.
Yeah. I think, yeah, it's pretty gross.
Yeah, I tried to get the physical edition of this, but it was delivered to an address ages away from me, so I also read a PDF, like a kind of shitty PDF of it.
Yeah.
Which feels like the most authentic way to experience this book.
It's available for free on the Internet Archive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's how I got it.
Yeah.
So, actually, before we start properly, David, you have anything you want to shill? Well, I mean, I say, like, there are at least two things that you're involved with, Tooky's Mag and your novella, that I think you definitely should shill. If there's anything also in addition to those you want to talk about, please do.
Oh, thank you. I think what people like are interested in this kind of content would like a lot is we have Tooky's Mag on YouTube or Tooky's Book Club as is listed on Spotify and other places. It's just a podcast series where we focus on a lot of his book reviews, some of his culture commentary type stuff. We did something people that listen to your stuff, the most Book Club from Hell-esque coverage we've done is probably the parapolitics episode that you mentioned, Jack, and the Punishing by Justin Moan, who is the guy who infamously beheaded his father, had a lot of writings before that. We usually don't dive into that kind of material, but we did that time. It was pretty hilarious. It's a literally schizophrenic novella that is about essentially all humanity lives in China in a fake high school program, and then is sent to hell when they turn 18. So fascinating book, and we have a lot of fun on there. I'd say we're a little more shitposty than you guys in general, but we try to take things very seriously in terms of the giving everyone a fair shake. And then on the writing side, I do I have a novella in Providence out, which is I guess a slightly science fiction-y, low-level science fiction, post-apocalyptic novella. It's actually based and inspired by, it's a Weird Tales version of The Diary of Nicholas Cresswell, which is why I initially had showed that. Nice. I thought that would be a fun way to tie in. And I do essays on the Tooky's Mag Substack, so you can look that up. It's on our links on our YouTube channel as well.
And where can our listeners find your novella? Do you have a personal website or outside of Tooky's Mag?
It's Amazon. I just went with the easy way.
So what should they type into Amazon?
I'll include links to all of these things too in the show notes.
Yes, nice.
Thank you. Yeah, just in Providence. And I don't think there's many other Improvidences out. I think there's a band called Improvidence, but I don't think there's any other books. So it should be easy to find me.
Nice. Yeah, go check out the novella in Tooky's Mags. I recently listened to the episode on Skibbity Toilet from Tooky's Mag, and I was completely blown away. I went and watched. I haven't finished watching Skibbity Toilet, but I could just feel my neocortex.
Your powers of over-interpretation when it comes to
vaporized.
Skibbity Toilet are absolutely phenomenal.
Gabe admitted he never
Gabe
watched
did a
it
wonderful
after
job.
that.
So that's his name, right? Gabe or Gabriel? He did a wonderful job unpacking that whole thing.
No, he hadn't watched any of it. That's what I'm telling you. He confessed after publicly. He said, "Oh yeah, I never saw it before we talked."
But he nailed it. There's this what was the term? It's something to do with like brain rot. Yeah.
Brain rot. Yeah.
As a genre of content.
Yeah. No, the two co-hosts, Cap and Gabe, they're geniuses. I'm so lucky. I completely stumbled across them. Like we just ran into each other and then decided to go for it.
Nice.
It kind of worked.
Nice. That's cool. So that's really cool. I would encourage everybody to go and check out Tooky's Mag on Substack and their podcast episodes
and the Sidebar
on YouTube.
podcast, which is great.
We've got a hatchet to bury, don't we, as well, with the Tooky's Mag Discord.
Do we?
We've got a war. We've got this is the fourth intifada between BCFH and Tooky's Mag. Hey,
The bloodshed ends now.
It ends now.
It's the Treaty of Versailles.
Yeah, we made
nothing bad will happen after this.
Nothing.
Stirring shit.
No, it's good.
But yes, people should definitely check out Tooky's Mag and the Sidebar podcast. You guys go into you're all very close readers, and you go into a great deal of detail about a very, very wide range of books. So your most recent episode, I think, was on Give Up the Ghost by PCM Christ.
Yeah.
Just a very, very close reading of a book that, if you're not part of certain Twitter circles, you probably wouldn't be aware of. So, really, really cool podcast and well worth checking out.
Yeah, we set up knowing we'll probably only get 500 subscribers ever, and we actually got more than that. So it's funny. We have a very clear mission to build a certain kind of culture, and so I think that kind of sustains you.
What's your mission in that respect? What sort of culture are you guys aiming to
Global
build
communism.
around?
Yeah, exactly. It's actually pedophilicity.
Industrial eschatology.
So my mission statement in getting it started was to create a living culture, and by that I mean rejecting, internet mediated culture has this way of trapping us into the historics and the greats. Like if you go onto BookTube, YouTube Book Talk, you'll find 100 new videos in the last 24 hours about who is H.P. Lovecraft? Whoa, who wrote Conan?
Guess what he called his cat?
Yeah, exactly. It's like this maelstrom whirlpool from hell that just sucks everything into it. And I just can't listen to another one of those freaking videos. I need, And so we try just to cover only things that come out in the last 2 years. Stuff that comes out from small presses and stuff.
So
like
what
that.
you mean by living culture is so like fighting back against the. I guess it's a bit monotonous, I suppose. Of course, the classics are classics for a reason, right? But what about what's happening now? What's cool that's coming out now?
Exactly.
Yeah, that's very of. Is it Jack Ma? No, Mike Ma.
Mike
Not
Ma?
Jack Ma. Mike Ma. Yeah, harassment architecture.
Friend of the show, Jack Ma.
I feel like there's been a few of the books that we've covered, or authors that we've covered, that have a bit of a, not necessarily a disdain for like older stuff. Oh no. Mike Ma definitely has a disdain for older things, it seems, if I'm not misremembering. But yeah, like not a disdain for older things necessarily, but an embracing of like the frontier, new things, almost like futurist, as in futurismo.
Yeah.
The
cool.
inspiration. Oh, I'm sorry. Please go ahead.
Oh no, it's really cool. Sorry, go on.
No. I was going to say the angle of the inspiration was from a completely different thinker, but a buddy of mine, Michael Lindsay. He wrote this essay, "A Living Religion," which had some minor virality. Maybe you guys will see it. If not, I would highly recommend it. He writes under the name Thought Fox on Substack. He has a book coming out under the same name. And it just, that one's more focused on spirituality, but it's the same idea of, unless you have constant, steady, new experiences, natural experiences, there's like this deteriorating internal effect. Anyways, that's to go a totally different tangent, but it's the same line of thought of what you were just saying about this frontier spirit.
And do you feel as though you and your team and your audience now that you're building is like where would you rate your progress so far? How do you feel about it? In building a living culture.
In the grand scheme, you look at Skibbity Toilet, comes out and it gets 50 million views in 10 seconds. We're small, but we're a lot more than we were a year or two ago. And we're pretty critical too. I think that's the other thing that distinguishes us from the other aspect of that maelstrom of the internet mediated culture, is that everything is a backpat and a you review me, I review you, you suck me, I suck you. Author interviews, nothing against, huge shout out, friend of the show, Book Club from Heaven. Nothing. I think that's awesome to do positive book interviews, but a lot of times it's like the person hasn't read the book, the person hasn't thought about the book. I see it everywhere. It's very low effort, and it's just like, this will get me X Twitter followers. And we will tear stuff apart from people that are bigger than us. Like I've seen you guys do before. And I just think that is such a cultural contribution comparatively to this, what the internet algorithm will promote.
Yeah, circle jerking. Anti-circle jerk.
Yeah, that's
or at least like cynical circle jerk.
Oh no, are we forming a cynical circle jerk together now?
Yeah, we're cynical just like you. So yeah, that's really interesting. I think it's great. There's a lot of really interesting stuff out on the frontier. Obviously, the business model side of things is a little bit harder to figure out because, like, if you've heard of Ryan Holiday, he's this stoic dude. He's got many books does this motherfucker have about stoicism? It's like, how many times can you really rehash that shit? But apparently he's got like 4 books or something, guy's best-selling author, and has this. It's like, yeah, but come on, man. It's like that stuff's been around for 3,000 years. Like, I think we get it. Like, I don't know, being out on the frontier of the long tail with our podcast has been a really interesting experience, and I think our listeners appreciate the irresponsible exposure to just completely batshit ideas.
Just actually anything we can get our hands on.
I've seen them in the Discord. They're a bunch of weirdos. The stuff they recommend is, you guys, yeah,
It's pretty out there. Yeah.
It's a good combination of books I actually want to read, and then books that I know they're recommending because they know they'll make us angry.
Yeah, it's a nice combo, actually.
So in terms of that brings us around, actually.
Back to the
segue
book.
into expectations for this book. Unless there's more you want to say, David, about
No, I'm totally good.
projects
I
you feared
appreciate
of.
it.
All right. And actually, for listeners, we'll hopefully be getting David back on to talk about his novella.
Yeah, that'd be really cool. Yeah.
I've got a copy inbound, and I've got the PDF, so we'll set up a time to talk about that. And we'll change up Book Club from Heaven by just mangling David when he comes on. Just having the
we'll
most
just rip into him.
unpleasant interview we could possibly have.
Actually, it will be Book Club from Hell. We'll show our first live torture session.
2.5 hours of screamed abuse.
We actually track him down and start waterboarding him.
Record it.
Please, let me go. For everybody listening, it's I'm playing on a David, being the guest of honor, has hometown advantage, and I'm down with a pretty severe handicap of being really late at night. So if I start just like saying stupid stuff, and I'm really hungover from an incredibly good wedding that I just went to, and I had to fly as well today, so hungover, just got off the plane, and then and it's really late. So if I'm delirious or I slur my words, it's neither diabetes nor alcohol. It's just me being tired. And so
Levi has situated himself in hell so that he can talk about the insights derived from Program to Kill by David McGowan. So,
cool.
David, you can go first. What were your expectations going into this book? Like, what did you know about it? What had you heard about it? What did you think you were going to get? How were you feeling about beginning to read it? So on.
Well, I expected a pretty straight description of serial killing, and then an accusation that the CIA controlled them. And that is a big part of the book, but it's not everything. It also covers, I guess I also expected to be better structured. Maybe that's the biggest out on Front Street line to put out there is the organization is very chaotic. The grammar is subpar. There's a lot of, if I had a penny for every missed possessive apostrophe in this book,
really generous.
I'd have like $20. It's still good. It's completely legible. It's readable. Most people that aren't like into writing or grammar Nazis wouldn't give a crap. But you know, it's a little bit more underground in that sense, I guess you could say, than I expected.
It's not.
So that was my expectation going in.
Ones, but it's still
no, not Timothy Dexter's glittering prose.
Yeah, and I guess your question, you know, that's what I expected, and then and I expected to probably be a little more skeptical of some of it. He actually, and I'm curious how this worked for you guys. You know, the big two chunks of it, the first like third is much more focused on the idea of pedophile conspiracies and pedophilia as a means of political control, and the second like big, you know, the majority of the book is a lot of like blow by blow description of serial killers and their trials. And that really shocked me that it was much less, it was much more, there's a concept in fiction writing you guys have probably heard of, I've done my research, now you have to as well, right? Like you just dump your research on the audience. Like if you're writing about spaceships, you just dump like everything from a Wikipedia article you read about how ion engines work.
It's called science fiction author syndrome.
Yeah.
And he has that. It's much less, what's the word? Not amalgamated. It's much less synthesized.
It feels at times like a bunch of Wikipedia pages stitched together.
Yeah. We should say this was written in 2002, was it? So this was, that may explain some of it. This was earlier internet, and his research was pretty much all manual, in person, bootstrap, and based.
Yeah, now you can jump on YouTube and you can just watch recordings of like trials from the US and stuff. It's crazy.
Dude, imagine this guy on 9/11. You know, this book was 90% done, 98% done.
Oh, he was fucking nuts. Yeah. Having a field day.
Yeah.
Levi, do you want to go next?
That's my take.
Yeah, I was a little bit surprised by it in terms of like the date. It was because we're living in the aftermath of all of that, like Pizzagate stuff and all that,
and Epstein,
sort of thing. Yeah, and Epstein.
Just imagine if he was around for Epstein.
Yeah. And I was thinking, like, is this one of those books that the people who were involved with those conspiracy theories and riots and stuff or whatever, do they all know about this? I guess that'd be for a if when we get around to talking about parapolitics, I'd be really interested to hear like David's perspective on that, because it just seemed too eerily like some of the stuff coming out of that whole series of events. I was like, oh, is this guy one of the founding fathers of Pizzagate, the proto Pizzagate subculture? So I was just going in, I don't know, I feel like I'm so inoculated to being shocked by anything in this show now that I was just I kind of like, okay, let's just see where this goes. And I occasionally go down rabbit holes of looking at like serial killers and stuff, and just, I don't know, it's like watching a car crash or something, you know, you just can't look away. So I don't want to look, but also what the fuck? So I was interested from that point of view, just be like, okay, here's somebody who's going to have a different take on it other than just saying, oh yeah, this person, I don't know, what was it? John Wayne Gacy is just a crazy sicko guy who just did a bunch of crazy stuff, and he's just out there lone wolfing it. And so I don't know. I was kind of curious to see. Oh, okay, let's see. Plus, also there are some legitimate things around. I already knew about like MK Ultra, which is legitimately, as far as I'm aware, unless I'm completely uninformed, is true, and they did actually like perform.
I'm pretty sure that was real.
Yeah. So this is the problem with conspiracy theories. Not like the A440s, that's just completely batshit insane. but sometimes conspiracy theories are true.
Well, the thing is, like, and people conspire.
Yeah, exactly, all the time. Yeah. And so, and that makes me feel like, okay, you can't be completely dismissive just because something's a conspiracy theory, because maybe it's a legit conspiracy theories, but these days you can almost use the term conspiracy theory to out of hand dismiss something as like patently like prima facie untrue. And I think that's not a smart way of dealing with things, because then, you know, things like the Gulf of Tonkin or MK Ultra would just be dismissed as, oh, it's a conspiracy theory. But those things actually happened, right? So, yeah, but also I'm still going in pretty skeptical. I don't know. I just assume that somebody who's going to write something to this effect is, I don't know, not 100% there. But that's my bias, given some of the other books we've read. Yeah. What about you, Jack?
So I'm maybe not in the ideal headspace to read a book about international pedophile conspiracy theories because I just had a child. So I wasn't completely in the mood for a really long time about it. Granted, only about a third of the book, like David said, the first third of the book is pretty solid pedophile conspiracies.
It's a prophecy.
But then they go on to other stuff like serial killers and actually mostly serial killers. There's a bit of there's Satanism and drug dealing woven throughout, but the main focus is pedophiles and serial killers and I think the Phoenix program in Vietnam, which again
was
never
well explained. Like several of these, it assumes background knowledge.
Yeah, he never explained that, so I had to look at Wikipedia to work out what it was. We can talk about it later, but again, it's something. Phoenix program is something that sounds like a conspiracy, but seems fairly well documented that it actually happened. Mm-hmm. So I wouldn't say I was ready to dislike the book going into it, but I wasn't in the mood for something like this. I was peripherally aware of this book because it had been recommended a few times on our Discord server. I think most of those times were by Robert, aka Fake Gamer Boy. Shout out to him.
Shout out.
Who keeps suggesting particularly deranged books to us. So I was kind of aware of it. I recalled the front cover. I recalled the title of the book. I knew what the book was generally about. I knew that it had something to do with trying to tie together serial killers, mind control, and pedophile rings. But I guess I was somewhat interested to see how the author tied those things together. And I guess, spoilers, he kind of didn't. You, the reader, have to do quite a bit of legwork to stitch together all of these different fuzzy-edged puzzle pieces he leaves you with. With a bit of work, I think you can piece together what he's talking about. But anyway, so my expectations going into the book were that I would be getting a more straightforward account of serial killers and pedophiles than I did get. I wasn't expecting quite as much Satanism or drug dealing as I did get. I also wasn't expecting to get quite so many accounts of court battles. And the associational logic in this book was stronger than I thought it would be. Granted, I haven't read many conspiracy theory books like this, so maybe this is par for the course for that type of literature. But this book struck me as particularly free associational. Mm-hmm. It was a strange blend of, at times, what felt like very frivolous free associational logic. Particularly, he has a knack for noting that when an event happens, and he'll note, oh, this happened 3 days before the anniversary of Hitler's birthday, or this happened the day after Walpurgis Night, or this happened a week before the spring, the spring equinox, or something like that. So that sort of logic is combined with, because I didn't fact check everything in here, but combined with what seems to be a recounting of freedom of information declassified documents, which I found quite disorienting. Combination of what seems like actual evidence and just schizophrenia.
Yeah. I had the same. I was fact checking earlier on more as I had more stamina, and everything was true. Even like things that I had not heard before or disagreed with, and he was always right when I checked him. To his credit.
He beats you into submission by the end of the book. By the end of the book, just the number of court cases, and he's going through all of the evidence and all of the procedural errors that he didn't like. By the end of it, I was like, listen, I'll just take your word for it. They didn't
those last 3 chapters. Last thing on that though, part 3 is literally just it's called In Other News, and he just goes on on 3 random things.
Yeah, the ending, I guess when we're talking about the real meat of the book, we can talk about the structure of it, but the structure was kind of fucked up. I feel like this could be a much better book with with an editor. It would surprise me if an editor had seen this book.
Yeah.
Because he doesn't even really tie everything together. He's got a chapter, which is not at the end, I note, but a chapter called Conclusion,
In the middle
which is which is close to the end, but not at the end as a conclusion normally would be, which doesn't tie things together. He just keeps talking about serial killers, but doesn't conclude anything. That's like, maybe I'm being too nitpicky, but that actually really irritated me.
Yeah. The book, and it's something we'll probably talk about more, is just like the way I think he drops information on you is a bit irresponsible. But I can see is also why I think this book is so popular, because it beats the shit out of you. It literally MK Ultra conditions you, because it just beats you and overwhelms you with all these things, and you check it. Oh my God, this is freaking true. And then you more and more and more. And I think that is to its credit and its detriment in terms of its virality, because it's so toxic and it has such a profound impact on your psyche. But then also in terms of the facts themselves, because I think he undercuts himself with some of those free associations you mentioned, Jack, and he undercuts himself with his lack of clear conclusion of what is known versus what is he suspects and his theory is. Because I think the Satanism aspect is very critical, and some of his other elements are very critical, but he doesn't tie it together for you. And, you know, I went and did some additional research, that refreshing myself on a few things, researching some things that made the picture clear in my mind, but he demands that of you. And it's why I struggle to know if and I know we're not there yet, but whether I'd recommend this to someone. And another read that I might do following this, that I've heard is the better version of this. Shout out, quadruple shout out, friend of the show, Eric's Hahn mentioned as well. He is reading Eye of the Chicken Hawk, I believe it's called, that I've heard is a tidier summary of this, but is drier. Eric said he paused midway through because it's so depressing. But
I saw the cover of that book, and it's basically just a whole page of bubbles linked with various arrows, and I thought, I can't fucking do this at the moment. I'm not touching this.
I told Eric, so maybe in 2 or 3 months I'll be refreshed.
Just give me a bit of a break, because what you said, David, about this book beating the shit out of you is true. This book's an ordeal to get through. This is not an easy book, and it's so most of the books we read on this show are not easy, and there are many different strains of difficulty with books. It's not a conceptually difficult book. It's just difficult because of the volume of information he hits you with on every page without integrating it for you. It's just getting bodied over and over and over again with a tidal wave of raw facts. So in terms of context for this book, I guess we'll tie together context and a question we always ask on the show, or ask more recently: what's the problem situation that this guy's trying to solve? So maybe we can go with context first. David, you mentioned, it was either while we were recording or before recording, the concept of an information hazard. Can you talk a bit about what that is? Because this book is a fairly good example of that.
Well, you guys may know better than me. I know it through secondhand interactions, but an information hazard essentially being something that is almost like toxic to know to you personally, and that it has a communicability so that you spread the information hazard, or even inclination to spread the information hazard to other people. Like I think the classic example is like nuclear proliferation, like the idea of how to produce nukes. And in this case, I would say the information hazard is like a deep sense of psychological insecurity of knowing some of these things. Because reading this book, you fundamentally you are coming to a fork in the railroad here. You either have to say, and this is just the first section, you either have to say pedophile networks do exist and have an ability to grow and control people in political influence, or you have to say, I do not believe that. That's complete bunk. And I think after reading the first chapter, I think it's hard to say that there's not some smoke from that fire. And that's a profoundly terrifying thing to have to come to to grips with, that I think a lot of people meme about, oh, Epstein Island, he. There's a lot of, but there's a really profound.
It actually happened.
It happened. It's like inarguably it happened, and there's really profound consequences and like ways that should affect your conceptualization.
And then he just happened to kill himself in prison when the guards weren't present and the security cameras stopped working.
Yeah, as many of the other people in this book did. Like, there's a lot of people that just killed themselves really conveniently in this book.
So I think one of the key points to highlight with the information hazard stuff is that it's considered information hazard if it's true, but for some reason it's still harmful to like no.
I guess the thing is though, like on that, could it be an information hazard even if it's not true? That it's just a mimetically powerful piece of information that self-replicates for whatever reason.
I'm just looking at
and so long as it's harmful to you and it spreads, if it's true or not is actually not that important.
Yeah.
It's like belief hazard versus info hazard. I guess info would be it's like technically true, and belief hazard is like I guess anything could be a belief.
I've been reading Cyclonopedia at the moment, so I'm perfectly primed for this. I'm dreaming about the Gog-Magog axis and the fog of war with anonymous materials embedded in dust.
Yeah, I still can't believe you named your child Gog-Magog. That was a bold move.
She'll love it when she's older. And then in terms of what, I guess we'll get into what the problem situation this guy was trying to solve in writing this book. Also, while we're talking about the main content, but we can preface everything with, in general, why was this book written? Like, what's this book trying to address?
I think it's awareness. I think he's aware of these trends. He probably, some of them which are maybe not as real as others, but I've had a similar experience becoming aware of some of these things where you want to just scream it from the mountaintop, and then like most people, you realize a lot of people just are not receptive to it. And so he crafted this very, in his opinion, it is well researched in many ways, just not maybe the best formatted a way of, I think the mission is to wake people up to specifically the CIA, and in his own words, it would be the Phoenix program being brought to the United States.
Yeah, I guess this ties into the information hazard thing, doesn't it? It's of the nature of an information hazard that you try to spread it. And this man was more dedicated than most in that he researched this and wrote a flawed but a very seemingly comprehensive book. I guess when we get into talking about the book itself, I can go into this in more detail, but I find it very hard to evaluate these sort of theories because like I'm not motivated enough to go through point by point that he makes and try to verify it myself. So by the end of it, I was just accepting what he said. It was like, I guess so. I guess all these people are linked to Anton LaVey and we're all treated at the same psychiatric facility in California. And after going there, had their personalities changed, developed copperophilia, and were hearing voices in their heads and started killing people on the basis of command hallucinations.
You were conditioned.
Yeah. One might even say they were programmed to kill.
Yeah.
So I guess this book is almost the ultimate manifestation of an information hazard, that the information hazard made him write this tome that has then inspired so many more people to start talking about this information.
Yeah.
It's also interesting reading it in light of, you brought up the Epstein Paedophile Island. In light of that, like a more contemporary, well-documented case of what seems to be elite pedophilic malfeasance that was repeatedly brushed under the rug until it exploded, and then like the alleged single man at the center of it disappeared or conveniently killed himself. So reading it in light of that is unsettling, I'll say.
Mm-hmm. And stuff that I think goes on, because remember, this ended in 2002, so there's several things that he's not aware of that we have seen. Like, he never had to factor in Epstein. He never had to factor in. Are you guys familiar with Ed Buck?
No.
He's a more recent one. And there's I don't think he's as powerful, as potent as them, but he was the guy he's big in California politics. It wasn't big, but he suspected that he was a procurer of people in like small party politics that also similarly delivered hot shots, like killing drug doses to men he would have sex with. And he was always protected by political figures. Like, and he killed like 3 or 4 dudes. Just to say, like, there is signs of these, but there are instances where basically intelligence and other people get caught with their pants like completely down. And so I would say the Franklin scandal to some extent is that. The Finders is absolutely, I think the Finders is actually even more clear cut. If it wasn't for the level of media control that was exerted at the time of its exposure, that would be like the household name, which is exposed more in the FBI documents that came out in 2019, which he did not have available at this time, which is why I was a little frustrated the Finders didn't go quite as into the detail on the other connections, though he did suspect correctly that it had like larger satanic connections. And anyway, it's interesting. I don't know. I guess I'm itching to get into the meat of it. So I don't know if you guys.
Yeah, let's get into the meat of it.
Yeah, I guess I would just preface by saying I'm more persuaded by the pedophocracy, whatever the word he uses. I'm more persuaded by that. And then the serial killer, I think there is something there, but I just don't feel like he's got it nailed down totally. And I have like some theories about the shapes it might have actually taken. But yeah, we'll see.
I guess. Yeah, well, let's talk about the meat of it now. It's interesting, although I'll note before we do that, you talking about the different components of this book, because I feel like a lot of the isolated cases he's talking about here, I feel are probably true. And a lot of them, again, are proven to be true. Like Marc Dutroux, like that happened. It's never been explained why. So for those who don't know, Dutroux was a Belgian, I think he was a serial killer and pedophile who was imprisoned for
abductor.
Yeah, for raping a number of women, was released very, very early, went on to abduct, rape and murder a bunch of children. And I think he had something like 10 houses, and it was never explained how he had all of this, how he had all of these assets, why he was treated so leniently by law enforcement for so long. And it turned into a huge scandal in Belgium. So there were massive protests. I think the justice system and was overhauled to a large extent in response to the protests about this case. So
it was a nationwide strike, is my understanding.
It was gigantic.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of, so that's just one instance, but there are a lot of individual cases in this book of very suspicious, terrible things being uncovered, and then there being so many loose threads from them. I guess where I'm more skeptical is he feels a bit like he's reaching in trying to tie together so many different things in this huge, like what would be a global conspiracy of what seems to be an attempt to brutalize children using particularly sexual abuse to make them susceptible to dissociative identity disorder so that they can then be programmed by intelligence agencies so that then they will become serial killers, which can be sensationalized by the media to scare the population into control. That to me starts feeling like too many reaches.
Yeah, I don't know if he argues. I guess I didn't read it as arguing it was a school to prison pipeline kind of thing.
No, well, that's actually because we need to get into this, because this is the other. This is a huge problem with the book that I think all three of us have already alluded to. Is he doesn't tie it together into a conclusion.
Yeah,
and so you, the reader, are kind of reaching around in the dark, and that's exactly what I was wanting to get onto.
Yeah.
So before we get into specifics, what were all of our interpretations of what he was proposing or hinting at was the unifying feature or unifying system of all of the different components of this book? I've just spelled out what I think was at least part of it from my perspective. I'm still unclear actually what the ultimate goal was, because he has he'll say a few things like, "Oh, we're trying to bring the Phoenix program home." So, in brief, David, you might know more about this than me, but I think the Phoenix program was a program during the Vietnam War in Vietnam that was basically a terror campaign against civilians to get them to give up Viet Cong fighters and Viet Cong networks, basically by threatening civilians' families, by torturing civilians, and then on the basis of information that was basically terrorized out of civilians, there were CIA assassinations and further tortures. And I think McGowan seems to be saying what the US was trying to do was to, using this pedophile mind control program, bring that into the United States, so to terrorize the US population into submission. He also says some stuff about HIV being used to kill off people.
That was wild. Yeah, because
I'll quote. I'll dig up the quote of that actually, because this is where he really weakens his case, and so he'll say things that make me just immediately much more skeptical, because he'll pull out stuff like this. I also note this is in the context of he expresses radical doubt when it comes to many official versions of events, but when it comes to basically assembling narratives out of plot holes, so out of inconsistencies or unexplained things in the official narrative, he pieces together a narrative of plot holes, and he's extremely credulous when it comes to this. I quote, "There is another even darker scenario that merits brief mention here, even if it is almost entirely speculative. Atlanta is home to the Center for Disease Control, CDC, a prime suspect among conspiracy researchers as to the origin of the AIDS virus. The Atlanta child killings began, strangely enough, just as the first cases of AIDS, yet to be identified, began surfacing in a few of America's big cities. There is a possibility that some of the young victims, known to be involved in sexual activities with both adult pedophiles and other children, were deliberately infected with the virus to track the progress of the disease and determine its communicability through sexual contact." And he then goes on to say that HIV is being used as the opening salvo of a, I quote, "final solution that is now quietly killing millions." I bring this up both to illustrate the point of how he's making a narrative of plot holes, which I guess is sort of what a lot of conspiracy theorizing does, whether it's true or not, but also to demonstrate that he leaves very open what the object of whatever conspiracy is going on, which he also doesn't spell out, is. David, what did you think was the unifying system in this book? Or what sort of unifying system is he proposing here?
I think he does have well, I guess I would say my interpretation is this. I think there are two distinct things. There is the example that pedophile networks can be propped up and that they follow a certain protocol and they're commonly protected, and that one can be sort of deflated and one can be propped up somewhere else. And then I think the serial killer is a separate thing where they identify people that are already institutionalized or vulnerable to those kinds of things, and then they are brought into these established killer networks of whether it's a El Salvadorian death squad or Phoenix program, and then those same people are recycled, or an MK Ultra indoctrination in West Germany, which there was an insane of the serial killers in this. There's an insane amount of them that have were in West Germany in a 2-year range when that was heavily being done. And so I think there's the two arguments that the more compelling part of it is that, to me. I think him trying to tie to the Phoenix program, I don't think he makes as great a case for it. That is a core part of his argument. I think that's sort of the archetypal death squad program, which fair enough. And there's not as clear a case on that. And it seems to me that the implication is that the Satanism or whatever else is in fact like an intelligence program. To me, that's what I infer as his reading, right? It's a cult similar to like we have the Falun Gong today. We have the Moonies, which are like CIA influenced cults. I think is pretty commonly accepted outside of them. In the time, there's a sort of unknown, he suspects it's LaVey or the Church of Set guy. What's his name? It's with an A. Aquino.
Crowley.
Yeah, one of those. He suspects one of those two is the head, but it might have been another guy. Is the head of a internal satanic cult that essentially recruits people and then trains them to be killers or patsies. You get conditioned to one of those two systems. But there's not as much evidence because you're not caught. I don't know why, but there doesn't seem to. Well, I think one of my suspicions is that it's messy because not all of these people were actually involved in a program like that. Like I think there's a compelling case for Zodiac Killer maybe being something like that because, as is highlighted in the book, there's like there are multiple witnesses identifying different guys like convicting the crime and then are attributing him, or the Boston Strangler, like different, very clear there's different guys. But there is a challenge there where I'm not sure is this just police corruption and incompetence of just pinning it on a guy? Like that may have been a factor as well. There's like a whole larger dynamic that I'd be interested in exploring, or, how much is this like media police corruption? How much of this is top down on the killer side? Yeah.
Levi, do you have a feeling? So David separated things out more. I think I was maybe so influenced by conspiratorial thinking that I was looking for a completely vertically integrated system here where you're traumatizing children so that they can be fed into psychiatric institutions, so that they can be programmed to kill, so that they can kill people, so that they can make more traumatized children. I was looking for a donut economic model, whereas David interpreted it in a more decentralized way. How did you piece together the information tidal wave here? Political part one, that's politicians led, and the second, the serial killer part, is military led. Like that seems more intelligence military led. Okay, I'll just leave it at that. Reading.
Yeah, I think there's another two. Like if I try to be really generous with there's one which would be like how would I explain it? Like root cause versus say signs and symptoms. So you might have, I don't know, pain in your leg, and so you're concerned about the shooting pain in your leg, and then you go to the doctor. It's like, oh yeah, but that's because you've got a lower back injury, the root cause issue. And I think like one way to look at it is potentially like, okay, look, we're seeing instances of this come to the surface, but that's like a sign or a symptom of like a deeper underlying thing, and maybe it's not as like coherently explicit. Okay, this is the specific structure and the people that are involved in this very coherent sense, but we know that there is something going on. And here's a potential like interpretation or like explanation of what that structure could be. A slightly different way of looking at it as well, if I can keep my coherence here, is like it. Do you want to look at it like through the lens of like, as you were saying, Jack, like almost is there a monolith underneath all of it, or are these decentralized? They're sort of these malicious organizations and agendas that I suppose are ideologically aligned, but not necessarily like really super well coordinated. And then you have instances across like the landscape of these different organizations doing similar things. I think that in reality there's how would I put this? My one of my major concerns with conspiracy theories in general, but especially like grander and grander conspiracy theories, is they assume there's an underlying assumption of a hell of a lot of well coordinated stuff going on. Sometimes to the point of like, I think in reality, actually, you're assuming too much competence and coordination, and and maybe there's like not necessarily, I don't know, in the extreme cases it's like, okay, there's a cabal of extremely well organized people who are orchestrating just that's this multi-decade shadow government that's doing all this stuff. And it's like, well, yeah, have you actually met people in the government? Not, unless the shadow government is basically poaching all of the competent employees out of the non-shadow government.
That's why the governments don't work properly, Levi.
and Utopia or shows like The Office are actually just like to keep us distracted from looking too hard for the shadow government, where actually they're all super competent.
I have a libertarian view of pedophilia. There is spontaneous order amongst pedophiles.
So that's I guess we can get into talking about, because I was wanting to talk about also anatomies of conspiracy theories. So both what conspiracy theory can mean, because it can mean so many different things, and how these things are structured, and McGowan's thinking process. And while we talk about this, we can bring in examples in this book. Like, David, you can talk about the Finders as well, as an example that was cited in this book, and one that I think you know more about as well, because that information came to light perhaps after this book was finished. But it is interesting. So conspiracy theory can mean so many things. It can actually just be a description of large-scale examples of people conspiring. Like, for example, MK Ultra, like by the CIA. MK Ultra happened. Like, that was an example of a group of people conspiring to experiment on particularly American citizens with things like LSD or sleep deprivation or torture, to try to work out a way to mind control people. And it's just documented that MK Ultra existed. Conspiracy theory in the case of, say, MK Ultra, when it was dismissed as a conspiracy theory, is basically code for stop thinking about that, or stop investigating that by a large, powerful organization, or by a cluster of large, powerful organizations. And then you can go from that, like, say, a concrete conspiracy that is trying to be covered up. But conspiracy theory can also mean something like the 440 Enigma by L.C. Vincent that we covered for this show, which is claiming that the Rockefellers and who was it? The Deegan musical instrument company conspired to make the tuning of the A above middle C 440 hertz for the purposes of bringing about just complete social dissolution. Conspiracy theory can also mean just completely frivolous, free associative thinking. It's useful to say that as well when we're talking about this being a conspiracy theory, so we can more concretely define what we mean when we say conspiracy theory. Because I don't think this book is as frivolous as something like the 440 Enigma, which I think is actually just schizophrenia. But it's this book's scope, like Levi was saying, it's a very it could be invoking a grand conspiracy theory, because McGowan doesn't quite pin down what all of the information he's citing ultimately results in. He leaves that up to the reader. So I don't think it's as concrete as saying, well, MK Ultra clearly existed. It's somewhere between the 2 points of a concrete conspiracy and schizoid thinking. It's also important to note, or I think it's important to note, why conspiracy theories proliferate so readily. And I think in large part it's because, one, humans look for patterns, Two, organizations like particularly intelligence agencies or militaries repeatedly do really terrible things and then try to cover it up, which just makes an environment in which people, including me, can very easily believe that say intelligence agencies will do terrible things to the citizens that they're notionally trying to protect for their own purposes, whether it's to pursue more funding or to get more power in some other way. Just the existence of these organizations makes conspiracy theories easier to believe because sometimes the conspiracies concretely exist.
Yeah, I guess it's we explain the seen in terms of the unseen, and it's like would or at least for a long time. Yes, I don't know if this would be a good example, but say for example, like we don't see electricity. We see the effects of electricity and electrical energy, and we don't observe it directly, but we have this theory, and the theory is about like physical fields and the relationship of the energy. I don't know, is it a vector? I guess it's a vector, yeah. The energy vector to like the other fields, and it's like, okay, but that's all like I'm looking at arrows on a screen. That's just a representation, right? And of like the phenomena in order to explain the effects that we're seeing, like the ability to have a podcast conversation with two people on three people on three different continents. It's like there's clearly something going on here. But having said that, the same applies with obviously understanding the social world, and I try to basically just think, okay, is the conspiracy theory explanation the best explanation that we have of whatever the thing is? And so like there's specific historical conspiracy theories that you can point out where it's like, yeah, the conspiracy theory is the best explanation. It accounts for the facts, and especially as things get disclosed, if there's like freedom of information things released or whatever, then okay, then the non-conspiracy theory explanations actually can't explain, I don't know, if there's a bunch of stuff leaked by WikiLeaks or something. It's like, okay, where did they get those documents from? Like, are those documents real? And if you're going to say they're not real, then you're creating yet another conspiracy theory. It's just against like WikiLeaks in that case. So sometimes the conspiracy theories, though, they, Occam's razor, right? Or like the law of parsimony. Don't multiply unexplained entities beyond necessity, or don't introduce any unexplained or unexplainable entities into your explanation. They just completely ignore that idea. They'll just bring in anything they want, and it's when we get this like exponential expansion of frivolous inclusion of bits and pieces that are never justified or whatever. It's like, okay, well, this is just going. You're just making up whatever you want. Yeah. So I don't know. I think just try to like apply the same critical thinking that I would to other things.
Yeah.
What about you, David?
Yeah, my view of the conspiracy growth, there's a good quote from a more right-wing conspiracy thinker, Ryan Dawson, about people get lost in the weeds of whether this document is true, or his big thing was 9/11 and people talking about holograms and some of the more wacky stuff. And instead of just examining like means, method, and like who was rewarded by certain actions, and like systematically how that occurs, can often give a clearer image. Because I think conspiracy is often a result of, in the negative context or the positive even, there is the data proliferation and access that people have had since 1970 or so until now, ever increasing rate, is overwhelming. And so a lot of times you have to analyze systems, or you have access to like personnel, key details, and you can draw conclusions. And I think part of it is once you have a great level of knowledge of a thing, you can kind of connect some of these pieces, and that can come out in more kooky ways, like you guys were saying, different people having different scientific theories that don't hold up. But I think it's just a more, you could call it conspiratorial, but I think it's just a more mature perspective to say organizations are not real. There are people that are parts of organizations that run organizations, right? So the FBI can't speak. There is a person at the FBI who can speak on behalf of their boss, who is another person. And to me, that's where things get overwhelming, because it's such a large social network, and you're trying to examine who's rewarded, who's punished. And there's just such an overwhelm of data that often people come to incorrect conclusions, which is why I think it's good just to focus on like, the means, methods, and like key details and who's awarded. And I think it's like inarguable in any of our lives, even in like just in this little podcasting world, whether you've ever led a business or in an academic scene. I think, Jack, you said earlier that people just do conspire. Conspire has a negative connotation, but it's just that people collaborate and form social networks.
We can even just say people organize as like a... As kind
so
of
where is the line
between...
Where's the line between conspiracy and just collaboration?
It's whether I like
what
it.
Do you just like want to be
how much you like
private? Yeah, how much you like it? Do you disagree with it, or do you want to like discredit it in the eyes of the mainstream media?
And I guess also, so I'm not. I get in the context of this book. I guess this applies. It's just I don't know to what extent, because like I said earlier, I find it actually quite hard to evaluate conspiracy thinking, or I guess maybe as a slightly less pejorative term, because like calling this conspiracy theory is quite pejorative. You could even call it like a paranoid theory, if you define paranoia as believing that there is some sort of system operating, I guess, camouflaged by the surface level system, so that you have a system you can clearly observe, and if you apply a paranoid frame of mind, you could say, well, the results you're observing are actually the result of a hidden system at work. And I think this book is like quite prototypically paranoiac in that this guy is saying, well, there are all of these discontinuities in the narrative that are being presented, and so there must be some underlying system or a series of systems which are actually generating these outcomes that we observe.
There's a later essay from Peter Dale Scott, who's the guy who coined the term parapolitical. So the earlier one, I think you guys may have heard on the other podcast, was parapolitics is the manifestation of deep politics, which is those politics practiced and arranged, deliberate or not, that are usually repressed rather than acknowledged. And so these are unacknowledged political behaviors. And then the second addition he added years later was that parapolitical is the sovereign acting as criminal and the criminal acting as sovereign. And so the sovereign power has some level of exclusivity to behave and to control what is criminal. And there's a natural flow in any political body that they will gain control, whether that's controlling cocaine and profiting from. I mean, this goes back to historical European wars. Someone conquered a city, and then they would tariff the people that it was in the city they just conquered, right? Any army would behave in what we would say is criminal, but it is just because it's like an expression of their power that they're able to do that.
So I was going to ask you to explain first. So I'm not sure I follow. What exactly is? Maybe I'm just complete buffoon, and that whatever. But could you clarify again for me, like what is parapolitical? And especially in the modern context, like you've been looking into it recently, and how does it relate to this book?
Yeah, it's just historically, it was defined by Peter Dale Scott as politics, a manifestation of deep politics, which means like deep state politics, basically. Deep state. And its practices and arrangements, which are repressed rather than acknowledged. So this would be anything like a handshake in a back room about, look, I'm gonna say Kamala's the best candidate. You're gonna give me, $30,000 per year of this for my campaign or whatever. Yeah. Or it could be the CIA saying, something bad could happen if you don't do XYZ, dear leader of, small country. That is it. And then that is the historical use of the term. Currently, as a scene, it is a small cottage network of podcasts, YouTubers, creators, people that read this stuff and write books like this and articles that analyze from a more left-wing perspective, which is what where McGowan comes from. About which makes them a little goofy, actually, because I come from more of a right-wing perspective. They have this sort of fetishization of fascism, Hitler, and him coming back as the Antichrist or something. It's a little silly to me.
That is true. McGowan keeps noting that people are Nazis.
Yeah. And so Hitler's birthday.
That's really interesting because you would expect that they're, I don't think any reasonable adult will expect complete transparency from any organization. Whether it's trade secrets or just your strategy or whatever. But especially when it comes to political organizations, whether it's like donors or lobbying groups or politicians and political parties themselves. At what point does that thinking is like, okay, well, obviously there's going to be some level of corruption, which prefer there to be less, but there's going to be some. And where does it transition over from well, that's just the way the world is. There's stuff that's happening under the surface. Some of it's nefarious. Some of it's benign. Maybe some of it's actually a good thing. I don't know. And where does that transition over into being, I guess, problematic? And at what point does it also get into this, intersect with the paranoia based literature in your reading of all this stuff, David?
Yeah. So where is it cross into conspiracy and parapolitical?
Yeah.
I mean, that's a tough one. I agree that I guess there is a right to trade secrets and internal government. I guess it's more decision-making power. And I guess that's really probably where it is. So for example, in voting and in electoral politics, there's a whole question of how much does your vote ever matter? And this book kind of presents that in terms of the child abuse scandals, right? The population of in Brussels, in Netherlands more broadly, they very clearly had an opinion, and their opinion was not acknowledged for a very long time. And so it's well, what's actually running this government? Who's actually? This kind of goes back to, I guess, more a Moldbug critique about the cathedral, this sort of internal consensus of an elite, and so the question is, so I guess it's hard because this is from a more left-wing perspective that assumes a normative state of the institutions do what they say they're supposed to do rather than the outcomes they produce, right? Which I don't subscribe to.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, so I do like that. That's an interesting idea. This what's this? There's a saying somewhere, and I've basically adopted it now, which is if there's some government project or a government department, just invert the name of whatever the project is. If it's the free trade, whatever the crap, it's okay, so they're restricting trade. And so there's this complete contradiction between the functional outcome of a particular institution and what it explicitly might purport to be trying to accomplish, or what its portfolio is assigned. What portfolio is assigned to it?
Yeah, it's probably worth, at least the way I think about it, is an organization basically is what it does. Its output is what it does, not what its name or what it formally is defined as.
Or what it says it does. Because it's just public relations.
Yeah. I guess, so McGowan doesn't really come down either side on this question about how much of what he describes in this book, this global network of pedophile rings, of people selling snuff films, of people conducting human trafficking, of say, death squad programs in places like Vietnam or El Salvador, serial killers in the United States, to what extent this is centrally coordinated and to what extent this is some sort of emergent system because that was another thing I was thinking about reading this, particularly in the first third or so of the book when he was going really hard on the pedophile stuff, that some of these things, so it could be centrally organized. There could be some absolutely, I guess on one extreme, like some ghoulish council of people who are just globally coordinating pedophile rings for some fuzzy purpose. And then on the other end of it, it's self-organizing, because clearly, as much as I would prefer it not to be the case, there is among a minority of people in the world, there is just appetite for having sex with children.
Mm-hmm.
And just the existence of pedophile rings attests to that. Like there's demand for this. And how much of the existence of these rings is because they're just in whatever population you find, there'll be some at least basal rate of people who want to have sex with children, and there'll be a subcategory of those people who have the means to do so, and that drives the existence of these rings as well.
Or how much are people selected because of their involvement in these appetites?
Yeah.
Like that's brought up in terms of,
I guess that
Franklin scandal
is controllability. I guess controllability in any organization is probably, at the very least, a tacitly acknowledged feature in any hire or any HR acquisition, whether it's a conspiracy theory, conspiracy theorist, a serial killer, like they're recruiting John Wayne Gacy, or recruiting a software engineer at Google. It's controllability is always something that you desire in a hire. So I guess, in that sense, then an additional pressure for the existence of these cells would be that you can collect compromat on people.
Yeah. And that was a big part of the Epstein operation, wasn't it? Supposed.
It's very unclear, but I guess I'm going to now engage in my own paranoiac or plot hole thinking. the fact that this guy did apparently videotaped very wealthy or very famous people having sex with children would suggest the collection of compromat.
Yeah.
Look, unless it was just for personal consumption.
It's inarguable. The level of and the connections they had with what is it? The girl he was with Mossad. Like her father was a Mossad agent.
Yeah.
And then
really?
Yeah. Ghislaine Maxwell was her name. Her father was literally a Mossad agent who was killed on an assignment in England. His body was thrown off a boat. She comes from that world, and she is with him and everything. And then Epstein, the level of access he had and everything, and where the money came from, right? He was one of these guys.
Where the money came from.
Same with Dutroux.
Because has it ever been established where he got all that money?
Epstein? I don't think so.
Because this is
mysteriously wealthy man.
This is he just knew how to trade shit coins. He just did really, really well on Pump.Fund.
early on in Shiba.
He was an early adopter of Dogecoin. But this is why I've said paranoiac and conspiracy thinking a few times, and I just want to reinforce it. I actually don't mean that pejoratively, because say in the case of, Epstein's alleged links to various intelligence agencies, that is really suspicious. That's not normal. It's not normal to be mysteriously a multimillionaire who's incredibly well connected with the financial, academic, scientific, and business elite of the world, to have your own private island that just happens to be populated with children that are raped by powerful people. That's not normal.
Yeah.
And when someone sees that, and while there are, there are plot holes here. There are many plot holes that are not explained, and I don't think it's not unreasonable in this case to say, or to approach it with a paranoid frame of mind, to say, well, it seems like there is actually some sort of system operating out of sight here that would explain these things.
Yeah, offering permission slips at least to get away with it, giving the sovereign acting as criminal and allowing certain criminal enterprises to thrive that benefit them, and while squashing others. Could I build us up since we're in pedo world? Can I do a quick Franklin finders?
Now that we're a pedophile world. But actually just before that, it's
the shittiest
I'm just
ride.
saying this because I want to reinforce that when I say paranoid or conspiracy, I'm not out of hand being pejorative in that they're actually useful descriptors, but they're very loaded terms as well. But when I use them, I'm actually trying to use them neutrally.
Yeah. I want to say, I think you guys are right in that it is somewhat an emergent phenomenon. It is not completely top down, but then I think there are people that find it and exploit it. That's a little bit of my reading. I think it's supported by the text and the argument that I feel he is putting out. My interpretation is more that this is a system, a successful system that can pop up and operate in any larger system, right? Like this is an existential threat to any like large organization. That
you're saying it's a feature, not a bug.
Yeah. Exactly. Like they can sort of pop up anywhere and grow, and then because of the methods of control they exert, they're very successful. So you have to be aware.
Yeah.
And the way I think he does this is he lays out the three examples in his era. Then Epstein we just cover sort of the end where it's much more widely acknowledged. Each one has gotten more widely acknowledged, probably, and then in the international scene. But they all follow very similar systems. So yeah, Mark Dutroux we just covered, so I won't go in detail on that. But kidnap people, Brussels government just dragged their heels, let him out like right away. Very Epstein-like. He was much more brutal in his abduction and the way he kept people. The next two, I can't recall the exact order, whether I can't recall if Franklin was first or Finders first. I'll do Franklin first though, because this is how I came into this stuff, was the Franklin School. I was at a conference and I was getting lunch with two women from Nebraska who work in social services there. And we were at a restaurant, I was getting French fries or something at the counter. And I came back and one woman was like, I believe it. I heard this. And she said some stuff like it kind of went over my head. And after she was talking for a minute, I was like, I missed like the first part. What were you guys talking about? And she's like, oh, we're talking about the Franklin School. And I was like, I've never heard of that before. And she's like, oh, well, it was like this child abuse, like conspiracy or theory. And but the one woman like very strongly believed it was telling the other woman. And like, I wish I could go back and like rehear what I could have heard or asked because I lost contact with her. But following that, I watched a documentary, there's some really good documentaries, information on this. I'd strongly recommend. There's a podcast, Unlimited Hangout on the Finders with author Nick Bryant, who wrote a whole book on this. It's like just an hour. It's super good if you're interested in this stuff. But in brief, the Franklin scandal was a bank in Nebraska that was run by a man named Larry King, a Vietnam vet, who he ran this small town bank. He had all this money very suddenly. He came back with no money from Vietnam, where the author McGowan alleges that he was involved in some pedophile stuff and made some connections there. Comes back, he suddenly becomes very successful owner of a bank, and then he collaborates with Boys Town adoption orphanage type setup for troubled kids. And he sets up a very large scale, I think the largest scale of all of these rings, maybe, because I think he had 20 plus kids involved in this. And he had very tight ties to, some of this is from outside this book, by the way, because I did research because he was frustrating me because some things he wouldn't mention. He had very tight ties to the George H.W. Bush presidency via a man named Craig Spence, who I think is mentioned as he was a reporter in the DC area who would have the kids flown to DC to attend parties at his house with elite guests. His house was very Epstein-esque, cameras everywhere, recordings everywhere. And he would go on these midnight White House tours, which are acknowledged as really happening. Child molester Craig Spence took children into the White House, the HW White House, George H.W. Bush, our first CIA president. Former CIA at that time. And there's just obviously a ton of connections there. And then things got blown up after several years of this happening. And Larry King, Craig Spence killed himself. And then Larry King, he served like a nominal sentence, like 5 years or something. And now he just lives in a suburb in Nebraska somewhere.
Far out. Yeah. I think, and how do I put this? If you're an average person just going about your day, it's how do I put this? Okay, so like if you go traveling to like a different country and just see like how radically different people live in different parts of the world, like I don't know, people in India who just dedicate all their lives to just being a yogi and and they do all those weird yogic stuff like I'm just going to hold my hand above my head for the rest of my life. Just why? Because of somehow some spiritual, I don't know, like fulfillment thing.
Sounds like me and podcasting.
Get into the Guinness
Yeah. Just self-mutilation. And I guess if you apply the same thing, you're like, well, how radically different can people's lives be? Along the axis of, well, if you have a lot of power or access to power and you have a sexual preference for whatever it is, and you can exploit that. It's kind of my experience of like thinking through this is like, okay, that must be the case. Like, there's just enough people in the world and enough people in those upper echelons that there's going to be some of them that are going to want to do this sort of stuff. Yeah. And if they have the access to the finances or the connections or the power or whatever, like it just wouldn't surprise me that it is happening currently. And then my question would be more like around like, okay, well, is this specific conspiracy theory one that's actually like got a true positive? Like, yes, we've actually got, or is this a false positive? And it's just like they're just been like they've got some pareidolia going on essentially. Yeah, I don't know. That's my first thought. What do you reckon, David? Like, how are you making sense of like whether or not these conspiracy theories are actually like accurate and on the mark?
These ones I think are inarguably true. I think the Franklin scandal and the Finders, I think you're just fundamentally wrong, and I'm happy to talk if any of you disagree with me or don't think they're real at all. I just think the evidence there, people just got caught with their pants down, and they're not that messy in the future, which is why Epstein was so much more. It was much more consensual, much smaller number of children being used, and it was in a segregated place across an island, across an ocean. Like, they were much smarter, and they probably whatever they likely will arise in the future will probably also the people that do this will be encouraged. But I think you're hitting something fundamental, that the intensity of belief in people is a critical factor. And so having people that have an intense forbidden desire is so powerful. Like, if you think about every political movement, it is controlled by the radicals. It's controlled by the people that are missing Christmas dinner. They're missing this. They're working crazy hours. Those are the people that are most effective to an unhealthy degree.
Yeah, true. Yeah. So there's going to be radicals for all sorts of things, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and this might be just one more aspect of harnessing that kind of power by an elite. Not necessarily. I think this is like a hybrid. I think it's somewhat an emergent phenomenon. Somewhat there are people that give permission slips when it to benefit intelligence or police or whatever. And I think that's the interesting story that he leaves kind of open to you what level that is. Yeah. So I might be throwing in too many of my own opinions here, but that's my
why we have you on.
Yeah. I don't know. Do you guys have any other thoughts on the Franklin scandal? Otherwise, I know we don't want to do a blow by blow, but I feel like that and the Finders are just essential.
I think there's some that are like, as you said, like they're caught with their pants down. So it's like really like can't really argue with it, and then it's other ones. Like, I know the Epstein one is a good example of like, okay, well, if this was going on, they definitely put a lot more effort into like covering it up. And but yeah, anyway, so sorry, I'll let you go on. Were you going to mention the Finders or the Franklin one?
The Finders cult was, I think it was after, and it was like during the Satanic Panic stuff when that was happening, quote unquote Satanic Panic. McGowan would not like me saying saying it sarcastically.
Yeah, he did not like the Satanic Panic explanation of was it like implanted memories by psychologists and psychiatrists.
Yeah,
he does not like that explanation.
this is the other one that I knew before this through, there was an infamous stream from, what's his name? Mr. Medicare, which is worth checking out for people, which he just reviews the document. There's an FBI Vault release in 2019 that was about the finders. And a lot of it's covered pretty well in this book, even though he didn't have access to this information. But it validates everything he says in this in terms of what were the finders. It was founded by a man named Marion Petty, former OSS, precursor to the CIA officer, who ran a boarding house for OSS officers after the war. And then they became interested in this alternative living. They lived in more northern central Virginia. They had this estate, and they had outwardly, they were sort of this early hippie. It was like the hippies weren't really a big thing at the time. I think they were kind of like, and then they evolved into hippies. But anyway, all to say, they had this belief, they had these statements of what they believed, but then in practice, they were exposed infamously in Florida. Like 2 men were caught with 6 children, underfed, signs of sexual abuse. And the children would just speak about someone called the shot caller, who they had to like obey, do what they said. And then this sort of investigation starts as a result of that. Like, who are these people? Like, what are the finders? What are they doing? They raid the house. They find like very advanced computer equipment for the era, like extremely advanced. They're communicating to agents via these like phone, like they would connect to the phone link via computers. Some of this I think is from outside of this book. They don't reference that there, but anyway, in the FBI document, what McGowan did not have access to was that the FBI literally shut the investigation down. Like they sent, because the investigation was transferred to DC police. Then the FBI said it was an investigation of national importance, and they like ordered them to stop looking into it. And then most interestingly, at the end of that FBI release, there is coverage of the McMartin preschool abuse, which for some reason the FBI thought these two investigations were related. And in that, they have a literal fucking map of the underground compound, of the underground tunnels where the satanic rituals are being conducted. They describe satanic photographs of children wearing animal heads, killing animals. And it's just like, so either the FBI put this out as chicken feed to drive us crazy, or for some reason they thought the McMartin school abuses, which was this was like one of the founding cornerstones of quote unquote satanic panic. All these kooky parents thinking their kids were being sexually abused by Satanists. And they have documentation there that both of these things are happening, and that the investigation was shut down, and no one ever went to jail for the finders. Marion Petty, as far as I know, like him and the people in it are still out there. They shut down their cult, but it was and to me it's prototypical of the cult phenomenon, where the cult is propped up. There's a single leader who maybe is in on it, and then he has subordinates who are maybe probably believers in some of the ideas. Perhaps the finders is not as clear because we don't have a lot of interviews with the members. But then as soon as it goes down, you can do what they call a limited hangout, where you like hang out some of the embarrassing stuff to distract, like, oh wow, look at this kooky cult. And then you withhold some of the important things, like, oh, who were these people servicing? Like, where was this pedophilic material going? And why is no one going to jail for this, right? Which I think is a recurring theme in this, where there's a hangout of, you put out the limited hangout is the patsy in the serial killer half of the book. And then you withhold some of the more interesting or things that don't fit the serial killer profile as it's presented. So anyway, I feel like those two cases in particular are like critical to understand where he's coming from.
So in this, where, David, do you think the Satanism stuff comes in? So like Levi said, with say a certain proportion of people are just sexually attracted to children, and a proportion of those people will have enough resources that they're able to actually pursue this. So that I can definitely see that as a motivator. And we have evidence that this actually happens. Similarly, we have say, intelligence agencies seek to control people, and collecting compromat based on people's sexual desires is something that we have lots of evidence that intelligence agencies do these things. We also have plenty of evidence that intelligence agencies attract pretty amoral people who'll just do whatever to further both their personal interests and the interests of the organization that they're part of. I can see all of these things as motivators that allow for some nexus between self-organizing phenomena and phenomena that individuals or groups of people can intentionally take advantage of. But it's the Satanist aspect. Where, David, do you think that comes in? Like, this might just be my lack of faith making itself apparent, but where do the satanic rituals come into this? Because they feature prominently in the book, and I have a harder time seeing how those emerge compared to, say, powerful people fulfilling their sexual desires with their resources in the case of pedophilia.
Yeah, it was a bigger struggle for me too, and I don't feel like he elaborates it on. So it's more my hunch than anything. But I guess my reading between the lines of what he's saying is, or it would be, the Satanism is a engine for trauma bonding and compromat, as you're saying it. Like this is. You have to engage in the cult, and once you're in the cult, you're in a velvet prison, basically, because people know information on you. You have to commit heinous acts, and just purely by name alone, to be a Satanist is to be an exile within society. And so I think and I think they've moved away from that. So my pet theory is that Satanism was a tool, like the Falun Gong are today, but Satanism was a tool for cult. A cult of control and conducting sort of black ops in the 80s and 90s. And I think it was deflated. And now my theory is that they do prestige cults, things like, what's it called? Like XX Eocean or whatever. Remember that sex cult that was
XX?
It was like, it had a weird name. No one remembers it. It got memory hold really well, but it was a guy, it was a tech guy. I will find it. Onision, thank you. Yes.
Oh shit! That I totally forgot about that.
Yeah, and
that is some OG like old school.
Man, that's a blast from the past.
Reddit,
and
not Reddit, like YouTube lore back like 10 years ago or more. Yeah, far out. Yeah, because he was embroiled in a bunch of like getting minors to cross over state borders and stuff, wasn't he? Doing that sort of stuff, or something to that effect.
Wait, Onision. Is that a YouTuber?
I think so.
Okay, this might be
I hope I didn't
one.
just defame somebody by accident around. Like... yeah, no. I'm not defaming him. There's a bunch of allegations and stuff against him. Yeah.
Okay, it was a different guy. No, it's
okay.
Their name is impronounceable. It has like 2 X's and a Z in it or something, and it's like Xixian. And it was like a prestige cult of like a tech dude in, I think it was in California, maybe it was in New York, I don't know. And he would like have women participate in these like weird sexual rituals. But it wasn't like explicitly Satanist, and neither was Epstein. So I feel like maybe it's because the culture has become more secular. I think Satanism doesn't carry the same weight it used to. And also, like I said, my personal view is they deflate these cults when they become inconvenient, and they do a limited hangout of saying, oh, look how silly this goofy cult is. And then they don't say, oh,
so
actually, where's their money from?
Expand on what you mean by prestige cult as opposed to other types of cults. Like,
yeah, just access and wealth focused rather than spiritual corruption or celebrating of attitudes. I think as their cultures become more secular,
so it's a cult more for our grey, blandly utilitarian age.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So that the obvious example would be Epstein. Although, like, you could also see that with the cover-ups around what was that comedian who a really famous American comedian, the sweaters and stuff.
NXIVM, by the way, is the cult I was thinking of. Enixum. I don't know how you say that.
Enixum. Yeah. Yeah, right. Yeah, these are like high-powered, say, entertainment personalities and stuff. Bill Cosby, that's right. Like, how many of the people around them were like was helping Bill Cosby cover that up? You know, that sort of stuff. So it's this. I guess in a way, like luring people in with the prestige, with the status, with the wealth, or with the access to, like, you know, getting to see behind the curtains, and then potentially, like, doing all the compromat sort of side of things. Yeah, that's really interesting. I've never heard that term before. Is that a David's original term, or did you pick that up from like somebody?
Compromat?
No. The prestige cult.
Prestige cult. I've never. I made it up, but I'm sure someone else probably did said it too.
I like it. I like it. Yeah,
it's descriptive.
It's good.
I'll take it.
Nice.
I do need to probably take off in a little bit, guys, for like take the kids to lunch and stuff. I don't know, time wise. Is this gonna be a 2-parter maybe, or what do you guys think?
I am completely fried if it doesn't sound like it.
Do the pedo half and the murder half, or we can just sort of power through the murder half.
How about we can briefly talk about the murder bit, and then wrap up with how we feel about the book, how we and whether we'd recommend it or not.
All right,
the murder bit was, I think I prefer how you describe it, David, in that the murder bit and the pedophile bit are separate, rather than my attempt to see how this guy was unifying them. Because he does, so for listeners, what he does is he basically just lists a bunch of particularly American serial killers. Listeners can probably hear that I'm really, really sleep deprived as well. Serial killers, and basically through fairly turgid, fairly difficult and detailed descriptions of law enforcement and judicial irregularities in handling their cases, says that basically these people had help. So say Ted Bundy didn't kill alone, he had people helping him. John Wayne Gacy didn't kill alone, he had people helping him. The Night Stalker had people helping him, etc., etc., etc. And there's the implication that there was some sort of coordinating function that was trying to terrorize the American public with serial killers, and even with the concept of the serial killer as developed by the FBI, I think Behavioral Sciences Unit. Is that a fair summation of what's going on? There is more to it in this book. There's a lot of information in this book.
Yeah, no, I think that's good. The key themes, because what I would have killed for maybe at the midpoint was shorten some of the chapters, give like the key recurring things. But I highlighted killing style, a lot of use of 22 pistols to the head, which is like an oddly specific and very effective like assassination technique. That's like the mafia trained killer method. And yeah, to your point about it not fitting the FBI behavioral science definition of serial killer, huge variances in the type of people killed, the method of killing, which again fits intelligence training to use local props and tools rather than like carrying a weapon with you, because they're nearly as effective and you have plausible deniability. And those I guess were like sort of the key things, separating them out. And then just, it's hard because some of the cases fit this mold a lot better than others. Like there's probably 3 or 4 that I think just like he could have just dropped and made his case a little more compelling, because it seems like some of them might just be emergent craziness, psychopath. Yeah. It's like a few of them I wasn't convinced.
And that's why the pedophile part of this book I found more compelling, because again, at least to my mind, it just seems fairly clear that these desires exist. Certain people are powerful enough to act on these desires, and so you have pedophile networks appearing around the world. The serial killer part felt weaker to me, because things like so say a lot of people using 22 pistols, I'm not sure how common those sort of weapons are compared to other weapons in the United States, but at least like using murder weapons present at the scene of the crime feels less like it could be, I guess, from intelligence training, but it also could just be like you have some person who really wants to kill someone or is lashing out, and they just look for something nearby to kill someone with. Mm-hmm. That felt less like a coordinating function. I just don't know enough about how law enforcement works and how the judicial system works to say like how serious the irregularities described in this book are, and whether that indicates some sort of coordination, or how you'd have certain prosecutors and certain lawyers, etc., who just kept appearing in cases, whether that's normal because, say, the world of criminal prosecution and defense in a handful of states in the United States is quite small, and so you'll just happen to have the same people turning up a lot, or whether that's really unusual. I don't have enough background knowledge to say, but the murder part of the book, the serial killer part of the book, felt less strong to me.
I personally wouldn't be surprised if, not like all of them, but
Levi's about to endorse everything said in the latter half of the book.
Yeah.
I kind of, like John Wayne Gacy, for example. I don't know, like from what I've looked into with it,
He was very politically connected.
Yeah. I don't know, like, I can. To me, it sounds plausible. Maybe not for every single one of them, but that there could be instances where, somebody's been pinned or is like taking the fall for essentially like a more complex scheme under the hood. That wouldn't surprise me at all. Again, like if I go back to like the thing that I said before, it's like it's kind of, I think almost like approaching it on a case by case basis really is what's needed. Because I also do think that there's just people who would just do crazy stuff by themselves as well.
Yeah, he tries to differentiate them into a few ways: killers, and then what are the abductors or collectors? He calls
Yes,
them.
collectors. Yeah.
And
So gross.
kind of
The
works.
collectors are definitely the most disturbing, or at least
yeah,
for me.
they're really
It has the most potential to be maybe connected to a pedophile network potentially, but some of them just seem like lunatics. I actually watched the video of Leonard Lake. You can see there's a video on YouTube of him just sitting on a couch describing his plans to build like a sex dungeon. It's extremely disturbing. He's just this kind of like chubby, normal looking guy. And then he shows him, he has a guy he hires to come clear the forest behind his property. And it's just like, oh shit, that's where they're going to do it. Yeah. But he was one actually I wasn't as sure that was connected to anything, even though I think a survivor did claim that they were going to be sent, or they might be sent to a facility, which is another odd recurring thing. Henry Lee Lucas also said, a serial killer, that people were delivered to a ranch in Mexico, that there was some kind of system. And then two other people, Bob Bellard, who was a man that abducted people in Chicago, I think, or somewhere around there. And then also the guy I just mentioned, Leonard Lake and Charles Ng. They also referenced sending people to remote facilities in Washington State or something like that. So there's this odd, which maybe it's just a threat. Maybe it's just an easy threat you can make to someone you're torturing. But it was interesting. Again, a lot of these is just, you read, it's like 30 of these detailed cases, and then you're piecing together these recurring things of MK Ultra training. A ton of them had MK Ultra training or some kind of naval intelligence, specifically naval intelligence interactions. And of the abductors, it's like these threats to send people somewhere.
I guess it's also, so what do you think the coordinating, so you take the things on a case by case basis, and the structure of the book is such that he just presents you with a bunch of cases and kind of hints at a coordinating function but doesn't explicitly say it. What do you think is what's the coordination? What's the thing that has made him, McGowan, link together these various serial killers? Is it that they're being used to terrorize the American population into accepting greater, say, government control, or what do you think it is?
What does he think it is?
Yeah,
it's tough. I think you're right. I think his argument is that it's for greater, is to justify greater control, and to he uses the term deatomize a few times too, to deatomize society so it's more easily controllable in the future.
Yeah, I guess we can, is there more you want to say about the content of the book? Just because I'm aware that you've got other things to do today or this morning, or do you want to go into like how we feel about it overall and whether we'd recommend it or not?
I did have a joke I never got around to saying. You guys know Bob Bellard, the guy that like abducted men and tortured them to death. I said you could, but he was infamous for having a lot of guests. So I was like, you could have Bob's Borders. That's like the hellish version of Bob's Burgers. I never got a chance to work that in though. Thought I'd throw that out. The other one was interesting. It was a Zodiac killer, and a few of the other killings were very similar to this. Where I think I mentioned this before we started recording, but you had these alternate descriptions of, like, I know witness testimony is not considered the highest evidence, but like literally like different races, different heights of men. And Zodiac, and specifically, I think there was like two guys that seemed to be recurring. Like one guy was described as a white man and like kind of a hiker look, and the other was a black man. I forget the outfit, but like there was two really distinct guys that seemed to be working together, and the crimes were attributed to this mysterious Zodiac and then just kind of went away. And some of the killings he calls out in that specifically are people that were connected to like cocaine trafficking and things like that. And so maybe that the implication would be these are ways to have hit squads that do this, and then just do more generalized killings to obfuscate what they're actually doing. And no one talks about, 3 of the 8 people he killed were highly connected lawyers or traffickers or this or that. And instead it's just, random killings in a low crime area, because it's a way to commit crimes in low crime areas and not be suspected.
Yeah, I guess this really like shines some importance on the need for social network analysis. I don't know, obviously I don't know anything about this stuff in practice, but this seems like really, I guess, could somebody just always just like, oh, well, that's circumstantial, but I don't know, is it though, like at a certain point, if it's like, okay, a sizable minority or a large majority of all of like the victims of a particular killer inside of like a really important social network or whatever, it's just like it starts to become like seems a little bit too coincidental for it just to be like random. And to say that something's random is a way of like actually obfuscating the or like just a distraction tactic. It's like, okay, these are just random murders actually, but no, it's actually not.
Yeah, and I guess that's the problem
I'm
with...
well and truly on the way out. My ability to string together. I don't know if any of that was coherent. Sorry.
I think it's a problem, or just a problem faced by people who write these sort of books in general, in that you're dealing with... You've got a handful of visible events that are in some way exceptional, that there are unexplained features to them. And the people who write these books, who make these sort of theories, are basically theorizing about what the coordinating function linking these things, or what they believe the coordinating function linking these things looks like. And given that, say, quite often, for example, intelligence agencies are said to be involved, these agencies exist to do things in secret or to make their behavior hidden. Yeah, like that's their job. So it's almost just inherent in this enterprise that you're actually not going to have a direct look at whatever is linking these anomalous events. So it's like I've said a few times, it's why I find these sort of things so hard to analyze, because what coordinates them, if there is anything linking them at all, is hidden, right? By virtue of what it is. Sure. It is hidden. And I guess it is to feel confident in saying, yep, there is a conspiracy here. The groups coordinating these things need to make just such big mistakes that the actual inner workings of them come to light.
Yeah.
It seems with the killer side that never really happened. The closest was he does document a case of a naval officer, very high-ranking naval officer, stating, "Oh yeah, we have a psychologically conditioned assassin.
Oh, that's
ready
right.
to go."
Yeah, and didn't he say it at some international conference as well?
Yes, and then he just emailed, oh, actually, I'm retarded for the next week. He's just like, oh, I'm out of my office now. Don't listen to anything I say. I'm kooky. And no one ever heard from him for a while. Extremely suspicious, which again goes to this. There's obviously some working there, but I'm similarly, like, I suspect some of this is just, it's just like,
it's just
craziness getting out, or it's like just broken people that are broken partly by this conditioning, and then they're kind of like Kaczynski. Like Kaczynski isn't covered in detail in this, but he strikes me as someone that was just, it's known he was through some kind of MK Ultra program and maybe was broken, but he doesn't seem to be a part of a larger thing. Like he's just kind of broken.
Yeah, it is. It's almost like it's almost applying some strange form of statistical analysis to things. It's like, what's the confidence interval around a cluster of events? Like, what's the probability that these things are just random and completely unconnected? It's like we were talking about with, say, Dutroux. What's the probability that this guy owned 10 properties, but had just like the resources that he used to get these properties are completely unaccounted for? What's the chance that that is just accidental? It's like, in a case like that, you think, well, that actually feels pretty unlikely that this is just completely random. There's probably some coordination going on under the surface that we can't see. I guess then it's I don't know nearly enough to be able to say what that underlying system looks like. And I guess that's where, I guess with this book, maybe that's part of why he doesn't actually say what the system coordinating these various things is, because he was being, I guess, epistemically humble and not being willing to put that forward. What makes me less confident that that was the case, though, is that one of the weaker parts of this book is that he's making connections between things that I just don't think are connected. Like we said earlier, something happens 2 days before Hitler's birthday and he says, oh, well, he seems to think that that's evidence of some coordinating function. Or I think that there was a point at which he said some person who was peripherally connected to some serial killer lived in a shack in the woods, which was a lifestyle adopted by Ted Kaczynski, who was a subject of MK Ultra experiments. And that is itself also a link. Like he makes so many bizarre links that it weakens some of the hints of links that I think are much more likely to be actual links, which is perhaps my biggest criticism of this book. Is he undermines his own case by making the most schizoid links as well as much more plausible links.
Yeah, it shatters your framework of what a serial killer is very effectively, and then you get a lot of ideas. Like I'm still brainstorming of like maybe this handful is actually connected and controlled by maybe this or that, but these ones are probably organic. And yet it leaves you hanging there, and maybe that's why this is such an effective recruitment tool within that parapolitics scene, and it's so popular, is because
that's such a good way of thinking of it. Yeah, I was wanting to say something similar, but you saying it's a recruitment tool is very good and is very in fitting with the theme of the entire book. It does very effectively inculcate a paranoid frame of mind because of the intensely rhizomatic approach to information this guy has, of just everything is connected to everything all the time. And it's even when he's describing quite innocuous things, like where someone went to university and where they practiced law, for example, he conveys this information in such a way as to make you feel like something suspicious is going on. But when you take a step back and reread the paragraph, you're like, oh no, he's actually just describing someone's educational and professional history. There's not a there. So you're right. It's a very effective recruiting tool into a paranoid, parapolitical state of mind. Which I guess it's actually, if you're wanting to experience that as a reader, is something to recommend this book. But also, if you don't want to experience that, then it's a reason to stay away from it.
Yeah, I just think it's positive in the way that it does that, because I think a healthy person should have this level of critical analysis, but just it's an unhealthy speed at which it does it to you. So you buckle up if you're going to read it. And
this book is like being slapped in the face repeatedly. It's just it's a huge load of information.
So would we're up to the concluding questions, right?
Yeah.
I you know what? I've probably softened. I'd say like reading the book, but also having the conversation with you two has softened my heart, opened my heart to more paranoid, parapolitical ideas. I think, I don't want to be dismissive. I guess that's the thing, the balance between like wanting to be a critical thinker, but then also like having not just outright saying that, that's because this idea falls into conspiracy theories, so it's bullshit. Like, that's not critical thinking, either. So, like, you've actually got to like rummage through it and have a think about it. So I actually say that's actually, compared to say like the A440 Enigma, which you can just go, no, that's just, that's just completely bananas. This one is like actually a lot more thought provoking in that on that level, and so and then I guess it depends what would I recommend reading it. I don't know, like it's pretty tough going. The middle section is pretty tough going there. I don't know, like it not necessarily, maybe not from like the point of view of like enjoying like yourself, but maybe. I'd sort of double down on what Jack says. If you want to experience that, like going into the sort of paranoid state of mind and like thinking through it, like it's much easier or a much better book to do that with than something that's just bananas like A440 or some of the other conspiracies that we've covered on the show. And also, like, to be fair, also the guy's he's written a lot of other books as well. He seems, I don't know, maybe was he? Correct me if I'm wrong, but was he actually trained as a journalist, as an investigative journalist, or am my neurons are misfiring?
It's the only thing I've ever read from him. I saw an interview with him. That's all I know.
Yeah. McGowan.
In terms of whether I'd recommend the book or not, I guess recommend to whom is always the question, and particularly with books we cover on this podcast. Narratively and structurally, if you're approaching the book to get a clear idea of a sort of a structure of malfeasance by powerful people, and you're just wanting straight information and a clear plot, I don't know if I'd recommend it, because this book you have to do a lot of legwork yourself. If you're looking for an altered state of feeling paranoid, it's very effective in that respect. I guess I would recommend it to someone who wants to feel that paranoia or is interested in these things otherwise, just with the caveat that the book is hard work. This is not an easy read. And in terms of whether I believe what he says or not, I guess we've been over this a few times, but I think some of the things he's talking about, there probably is fire where the smoke he's describing is. And then other cases he discusses could just be that, like, they could be isolated or they could be completely fabricated, which is the biggest advantage and biggest disadvantage of this book, is that he just info dumps you, hints at a structure but doesn't give it to you, and then leaves. And depending on your tolerance for that, also it would depend whether this is a book for you or not.
Yeah, I think my recommendation would be very confusing, because I would say read the first 150 pages and then I give you permission to stop reading there once you get to the serial killer. And it's just because it really becomes like mid-chapter he'll just switch streams to another serial killer, and after a while it just, the numbers and the names blur together if you get the gist.
And the court cases.
Yeah, I read it when I read the first 90% before I took a break and then finished it right before this. I took a lot of breaks to do my own research and refresh myself on stuff, which I think is maybe the good way to do it because it's so fire hosey. Like read a chapter 2, watch a documentary, podcast, or articles from similar sources on some of the stuff. Like, because it exposes you to so many different ideas. But but I would I would agree.
It's such a kitchen sink book.
It is, yeah. But worthwhile. And he did like a lot of really valuable research. So I don't want to take it away from him. There is, as you were saying, Jack, there's definitely some fire there. He's at least 60% right, probably, I would say. Like there's definitely a lot right. And then there's like some off the wall stuff, some more speculative stuff, which we're speculating a bit too, because that's sort of the nature of a conspiracy or a mystery.
It's kind of what makes it fun as well.
Yeah. It's I guess, that's ultimately whether I'd recommend it or not is how motivated a person is to get through it, because it's hard work. And I totally agree with you, David. The first maybe third of this book is by far the strongest bit. And then it gets much more difficult and less, I don't know if I'd say less compelling, but less obvious if there's a there. Yeah.
It's just I think it's also a social network thing too, because referenced before, it's exhausting to track and monitor social networks. Like one of the most mentally taxing things you can do. Whereas these abuse, child abuse networks are like quite clear when you've penetrated it and you're like, okay, this guy's a leader, this guy's maybe a leader, these are like some operatives. Each serial killer is a world unto themselves, and you have like corrupt lawyers, you have possible satanic connections, and it's just it is just that level. We've kind of hit this nail a few times, but the information overload is most heavy there. And I don't know, I definitely want to read more on this kind of stuff. Like I said, I'm taking a 3-month hiatus at least. I need a shower, but I might check out Eye of the Chicken Hawk or something similar.
I'll need to take a break from this sort of stuff for a while. It's also, I just haven't been that exposed to this sort of stuff. I guess I'm now blooded because I've made it through.
Nice
Program to Kill, seminal text in this world.
So should we do a final round of shilling?
Yeah.
Last Tooky's Mag, Substack, podcast.
Can I ask, actually, is it Tookies or Tookies Mag? Because I swear I've heard both pronunciations on your own podcast.
Yeah, well, it's a name I just made up. It's literally just a the first thing I put on there was a short story, and the name of the bar was Tookies or Tookies. So there is no real Tookie. I am not Tookie, even though everyone calls me Tookie. It doesn't matter. It's just me. It's all made up, and the points don't matter. I say Tookie. That's how I say it.
Okay, Tookie it is.
Tookie. Yeah. Well, we'll go with that. That's the canonical pronunciation.
Yeah. But for a lot of people have issues pronouncing it. But Substack, if you look up Tookies Mag, I think I just said the other way there. I'm keeping you on your toe. I'm psychologically conditioning you. Picture my face on the target as you shoot. The podcast is on iTunes. It's on Spotify. If you look up Tookies, TOOKYS book club or Tookies Mag on YouTube or there, you'll find it. And we just do a lot of more fun stuff than this. Generally, this was fascinating for me. We did do the parapolitics episode on this. It kind of initiated me reading this book, and then somewhat regrettably having you guys read it too. I do feel super bad for you, Jack, reading this in the condition you are, because I've been there and I know how your brain literally changes when you have a little one like that. And you're just in defense mode.
She just doesn't quite understand that waking up every hour when I'm trying to sleep is maybe not the most helpful thing she could do.
So we might be having you back on. Hopefully we'll be having you back on to do your novella as well in the future.
Talk about improv.
So that'll be really cool.
Thank you. I'd love to. We gotta have you guys on too for like 100%. We have 2 books we're debating which one to do, 2 or 3, but we will definitely figure something out.
And also, you guys have a Discord as well. So
yeah, we do. It's actually kind of private. It's just for, invite only. But if you message me, I'll add you. We're not that cool.
Nice. Well, thanks so much for coming on. Looking forward to having you on again to talk about your own work.
No, absolutely. I love everything you guys are doing. I've been listening since at least Mine Were of Trouble. maybe.
Oh
even
man,
earlier.
such a good
that was
episode.
ages ago.
Yeah.
That was a really good book.
Yeah, that was
We could
really
cover
good.
other books of his, actually. So he wrote at least 2 other books on 2 other wars he participated in.
yeah,
Fucking psycho.
yeah. I want to read his World War II one. I think he was in Eastern Europe. I want to say.
Yeah, well, he was some UK part of some UK commando group, I think.
Yeah.
The guy was a
Yeah.
serious operator. He was probably a really scary guy.
Yeah. I just love the end of Mine Were of Trouble, where he just kind of like a very autistic conversation with Franco. Like Franco described very awkward and just like, there's no war. Don't worry about it. Yeah, great read. And you guys, just congrats on you guys. It's good seeing you guys continue to grow and do new things. Someone that's just listened for a while, and it was like a huge honor to be able to hop on.
Oh, of
Thank
course.
you for coming on. Yeah, it was
Really
lovely.
great having you on. It's very gratifying that people are willing to read books in order to talk to us about those books on the podcast.
That's what makes the content so good. It's actually effort involved. People actually, you didn't just show up. It's not a show up and chill stream, which is, again, to go back to when we first were talking about the social, the downsides of social media and network effect of like low quality content. Everything is just a live, unedited live stream where no one read anything or did anything to talk about. Hey, you see what Trump did today? Oh wow, do you see what Hillary or whoever?
Only the dedicated and the passionate will read "Programmed to Kill" by David McGowan in order to talk about it for an episode. That's a level of autistic derangement that only the chosen few can aspire to.
We happy marry few.
Big shout out to Levi for making it through the entire episode.
Yeah.
Very tired and hungover.
Yeah. I apologize if any of my questions to you, David, were just incoherent or whatever. Hopefully, it wasn't too bad.
It was all good.
Thank you, everybody, for listening.
Thanks for listening. See you next time.